The WXO was a short-lived company that rose and fell in the year 2000. The company only managed to put together 3 shows, none of which did much to set the wrestling world on fire. The Fed had some star power attached, with the former $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase acting as the CEO, and Repo Man Barry Darsow booking the shows. They also brought in plenty of names that weren't booked elsewhere, with their roster consisting of the likes of Barry Darsow, Eric Watts, and Scott Nash. Okay, maybe they weren't exactly all A-listers, but they did actually have a few names in their time. There's something else that should be stated. While Ted DiBiase seems like an ideal choice for an evil general manager, the guy had all the money in the world, a penchant for telling everyone about it, and an evil cackle to top it all off. The problem here is that the company wasn't run by that bad guy billionaire, but instead by the man who once played that character. Gone was the everybody has a price, and in its place was everybody gets a chance. And this really exposed the fact that his charisma apparently was attached to that character, and without him playing that part, he wasn't all that entertaining. As a character, he was always on high energy, but as a person, he's devoid of any energy. The show was commentated by Sweet Stan Lane and Chris Cruz. Not that that matters for reasons we'll get into. Now, before I even go into the show, I know what everyone watching this must be wondering, and that's, what does the WXO stand for?
I don't know!
It doesn't seem like it stands for anything. They're just letters.
Your name is letters?
All names are letters, dickhead.
While I may not be able to tell you what the name of the show was, what I can assure you is that this was a family show. And I know this because they wouldn't shut up about it. They feel the need to mention it every time they try to promote the show, so it's clear that this was really a selling point for them. But who were they trying to sell this to? This was wrestling during the Attitude Era, where fans wanted more rowdy, adult-oriented shows. The commentary does their best to keep things squeaky clean, which, as you might imagine, when dealing with a seemingly violent sport, isn't always the easiest thing to do. I'm not saying I need the commentators to curse or act out, but even PG-era Raws had much more loose guidelines and more descriptive commentary. What makes matters worse is that the commentary team has a bad double standard, where they won't curse, but they will catcall their female employees any chance they get. Look, all I'm saying is be consistent. Jerry Lawler sexualized the women's locker room and still managed to call a match. Not that commentary is too much of a problem here, as you can barely hear the discussion of the match over the audience, who are just on their feet all night, except any time that they're actually shown. The sound was very badly sweetened, which really sours me on the whole show. At the show, the crowd was mild, but in post, the crowd went wild. It's weird because it's an endless loop of a crowd loving what they're seeing over footage of a crowd who's mostly uninterested in what they were given. It's a very bizarre mashup. And speaking of bizarre mashups, the very first match of the show, and in the company's history, is kind of symbolic of the product itself, as this is the most random assortment of men I have ever seen in my life. As nepotism hire Eric Watts teams with founder of CZW, Zandig, to take on the team of one half of the Fantastics, Tommy Rogers, and future general manager of Raw, Adam Pearce. I don't know who thought to put these two teams together and then against each other, but it feels like the bookers were just randomizing universe mode. It's an odd random pairing versus another odd random pairing. Because of this, I don't think the two teams work particularly well together. Their inexperience in teaming together is definitely working against them, but no one does a bad job individually, except for Eric. Eric is not looking great out there. I think we could agree that he wasn't necessarily the greatest second-generation wrestler. Guy was not the Cody of his generation. Sometimes the second-generation stars are rightfully overshadowed by their more famous fathers. And this was one of those times. Although I'm gonna give him credit that no one else seems to afford him, but I don't think he was all that bad. He was a hammy-over actor with animated facial features when selling moves and moments. Now that may not sound like a lot, but honestly, it's a part of the gig. And it's a part of the gig that I feel not everyone has. His character work wasn't bad either. He knew how to play a heel. It might have been the most basic version of a heel, and he was bound to be hated due to his status anyway, but, you know, it's something. However, he'd also miss cues, botch moves, and just show a lack of in-ring awareness. which are all things he does throughout this match. It feels like the rest of the workers have to work around his inability. And that's despite the fact that Adam Pearce was only a few years into the industry at this point in time. Yet despite this, he's still made to work most of the match. Cause, yeah, alright, sure, why not? Anyway, Eric Watts and Zandig win. Not a great start to the show, but I don't blame the 4 guys in the ring, I blame the guy who put those 4 guys in the ring. Up next, it's Maniac Manny Fernandez taking on Shawn Hill. Now, I don't know what Maniac Manny is, but it's almost something. It feels like he's going for a more wacky, PG-oriented Goldust, and I don't hate it, until later when I do, but initially I don't hate it. Unfortunately, these types of gimmicks always have the potential to be really interesting and unique, but they also have the potential to just come off as a parody of pro wrestling when they're done wrong. Regardless, it feels like the character could use a little bit more work, and definitely could use a lot less kissing. At some point early on, Manny takes down his straps, and then has to spend the remainder of the match pulling up his tights. He struggles more with his singlet than he does with his opponent. Speaking of his opponent, Shawn Hill, on the other hand, just randomly takes the time to dance around the ring. Maybe I'd appreciate the two if I was more aware of their work and what it was they were trying to do, but as a first-time presentation, this tells me nothing about either man, other than they're both odd. The match is fine at first, the two hit some impressive moves, sell each other's offense, and have a believable back and forth bout. Aside from Stardust Sr. no-selling a beautifully landed moonsault and then kicking out of one. The match comes to an end when Maniac Manny crotches himself on the top turnbuckle, no-sells the injury, laughs, and then hits a flying headbutt for the pin. Just like the first match, I'm left a little bit confused by what it was I've just witnessed and what it is they want me to take from this. Let's just say this is definitely far from my favorite Maniac in pro wrestling.
The Maniac loves you.
The show builds up the arrival of some megastar, but we're only shown a shot of him from the back. Now, the superstar is supposed to be anonymous until his big reveal, except the issue is that anybody who's ever seen the guy would recognize him from his distinct look, posture, and gray sweatshirt. That's clearly Dan The Beast Severn. It literally could be nobody else. This was as obvious as the time a masked Kerry Von Erich ran down to the ring with a bedazzled Kerry jacket. Eventually, Ted DiBiase brings the Beast to the ring and introduces him to the audience. Now, Severn is an incredibly underappreciated worker, a skilled boxer, a solid wrestler, and an accomplished fighter. One of his talents, however, was not talking. So hearing him speak hurts almost as much as getting into the ring with him would. As Severn speaks highly about his past accolades and talks himself up, the locker room emboldens famous jobber Al Green to step up to the Beast, which goes about as well as one might expect. Severn locks in an ankle lock as the rest of the roster watches on in horror, until Barry Horowitz, of all people, rushes to the ring and starts a brawl to distract everyone and save Al Green in the process, for some reason. Once again, I have no idea what's going on. Believe it or not, the next match sees the entrance of Nash. Scott Nash, that is. An obvious dig at the outsiders Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Calling him Bargain Bin Big Sexy, or Dollar Store Diesel, or We Have NWO at Home, doesn't do this injustice justice. This jobber was made only to get a pop that never came. And considering that Barry Darsow is also the booker of this show, squashing a parody of one of the biggest stars and bookers of WCW, really makes this feel like this was some sort of vendetta, or a statement being made. I don't know what that statement would have been, but it was certainly heard nonetheless. Again, that's just how things look, though I'm sure that's not the case. In recent years, Nash has been very vocal about wanting to see Demolition in the WWE Hall of Fame. Anyway, the match ends when Mike Enos, who was involved in that previous segment with Darsow, shows up and hits him with a chair. The match doesn't end in a DQ, but instead a countout. So Scott Nash is victorious. Yep, only a matter of time before he teams up with Randy Hogan to start the WON. The main event sees the team of the Bodies, Armbiter Ace Steel and Danny Dominion, versus the team of the Heartbreakers, Adonis and Apollo, with their manager Giamore. Yes, this show both starts and ends with a tag team match, but at least this one seems to have two actual tag teams. The match is by far the best on the card, everyone in the ring is beyond competent and comfortable working together, the two teams have a good back and forth, trading offense and both looking fairly impressive in their own right. They have some creative spots, and while I really know nothing about these two teams, I am at least enjoying watching them. Ace Steel's selling is probably the highlight of this match for me. The match isn't anything special, but it's a solid outing, and unlike everything else on the show, doesn't feel ruined in both concept and execution. It's a breath of fresh air on a show that felt like a total dud otherwise, but unfortunately, it does eventually fall in line with the rest of the show, ending this match and this episode with an awful and awfully bizarre finish. The fight is taken to the outside when the Heartbreakers try to heal it up and attack the bodies with steel chairs from the crowd. An audience member, who the camera's shown multiple times throughout the night, suddenly interferes and grabs the chair from the Heartbreakers, causing the team to turn on the fan and beat him down. And then this causes the other team to also join in on the beating. And that's when an identical fan from further up in the rafters rushes down to the ring to save his clone. But if they're identical twins, and they attended the same wrestling show together, why would they be sitting so far apart? You know what, never mind. Questioning it just makes it last longer. Yeah, that question's not even worth asking, because that would imply everything else up until this point in time made sense. Which it did not. This was one of the worst wrestling shows I've ever seen. Ever. I mean, Heroes of Wrestling was awful, but at least it had the decency to be so bad it was entertaining. You know, that was something to talk about. This wasn't even that. This was so bad that I forgot what it was I was watching while I was watching it. Still, there are 2 more episodes left, so if you'd like to see a video on the final 2 episodes of this short-lived stint of a company, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
You can't just Ted Dibiase all of our dreams, dude.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.